Well, hello there, beautiful friends, and cheers to a special episode and a special milestone because this month I have celebrated official 10 years in my creative business and being a full-time self-employed creative entrepreneur and artist. And I'm so grateful to be here today, and I'm so grateful for all of you for listening to the show, for following along, whether you've collected my art or were part of Create Magazine or anything at all, even a like on Instagram. You have truly kept me going over the past decade. So I want to think about this episode as a little gift to my 27-year-old self. When I first started on this journey, I truly had no idea what I was doing. I knew in my heart that I wanted to really go for it. I wanted to be an artist, but I also loved the community. And so when I started the magazine a few years prior to that, about 5 years before I actually quit my job, I knew that my life looked a little bit different from other people. And I truly never felt like I fit in. And even though you might be wondering, this episode is probably going to be a celebration of all the amazing things that have happened over the past 10 years, I'm going to be completely honest with you and tell you that the reason why I'm still here and the reason why there are certain projects or achievements in my life and in my business is because ultimately failure were the stepping stones that led me here today. And so instead of focusing only on the wins, which are amazing, and of course, I wish all of us more wins, the truth is this journey is full of ups and downs. It's full of projects that don't work, piles of paintings that just didn't pan out, business ventures that fizzled out or didn't gain any traction at all. And these are the realities that I wish I knew when I first started because I was so hard on myself. And even to this day, I'm learning to have a little bit more grace because truly, most of us, when we set out to do something different, we are doing it for the first time. And most of us don't have a point of reference or a person who has done anything similar. So failure is going to become our best friend. And we're going to learn more about ourselves, our business, and the world through failure than any success you can possibly experience. And even not as a negative, but I will tell you that most of my successful projects, in some way, shape, or form, were a direct result of a previous failure that led me to them. So let's go ahead and get started. I recently had the incredible pleasure and honor of visiting Michigan State University. I was invited to spend 2 days there as a guest lecturer, juror for the undergrad senior show, as well as to do studio visits with some of the undergrad students. And I had an amazing trip. But the organizers asked me to speak more about failure than they asked me about success. And like I said, it's a reality for most of us who set out on this path. So it wasn't really surprising, but it really made me think back to all the ways that I failed over the past decade. And so I wanted to frame these failures as gifts, as like I said, stepping stones and ways that I was actually able to move forward. And so one of the things that I was reflecting on is that my past decade does not look like a highlight reel. When I look back, I see a lot of tears. I see a lot of disappointments. I see sometimes negative bank account numbers and ultimately disappointing experiences, whether it was at an exhibition or when we lost our book deal for the first book we ever pitched to a publisher. And there were so many specific moments that I'm happy to share today. But this episode is going to be more about the reframe and the mindset of a winner, and the one that I'm still giving myself pep talks on every single week, because ultimately my stubbornness and my inability to quit is what allowed for me to continue building something as an artist and as a creative entrepreneur on my own terms. The first thing I want to talk about is most relevant to where I am right now. And one thing that we all hear is stop beating a dead horse. In other words, moving on and pivoting from something that just isn't working. And even today, as I'm sitting here, there's a project that I was really hoping to release this year that just didn't land. It just didn't get any traction. And instead of forcing it or trying it in a million different directions, sometimes you have to have the wisdom and the discernment to know when to move on from something. And my stubbornness can have a shadow side. So even though it's great to be resilient, to have perseverance and determination, sometimes the stubbornness can actually like lead to wasting time and frustration and getting stuck instead of moving forward to something that brings us both joy, money, funding, or success in other ways, right? Whatever that success is for you that you're choosing to pursue. But early on, I did really feel like if I started something, I had to finish it and I had to stick with it. Otherwise, it was a sunk cost. It was a waste of my time, money, energy. And the truth is, smart and successful people know how to quit. And I wish that there were certain things that I quit sooner. I wish that there were certain things that I stopped trying to force and trying to make it work. It's like, stop trying to make fetch happen. That was me. And one of the biggest stepping stones is to realize that moving on from a project, even if it's a work of art, I have plenty of failed paintings that I've nailed. I'm like, okay, this painting is not working. We are moving on. But in business, it felt harder. It felt more personal because business is based on relationships and you feel almost like you owe someone to keep going with, let's say it's a certain course or a certain retreat that you offer. And ultimately, I realized that letting go of a failed project or one that may be expired, there are things that worked in the beginning and just don't really land anymore. Times change. Things were very different during COVID, for example, versus where they are right now. It's not a failure. It's being smart. It's pivoting. It's not necessarily following trends, but following the direction of where the wind is blowing in your specific situation and business. So a strategic pivot, knowing that, okay, this is working, this isn't working. I'm focusing my energy and my resources and pouring more of my love and care into what is working, right? And the way we can discover that, there's a few things. It's not always financial, though oftentimes in business it is. For art, it could just be that you don't enjoy the process and it's time to move on and find a process that actually works for you, right? Or learning a new skill if you're really frustrated with the result that you're getting. And in business, it could be that you're trying to sell a certain type of work or you're offering a certain type of course or you are leading a certain type of workshop, or maybe you're a publisher like me and your publication needs to change direction. And looking at the numbers, looking at your energy levels, looking at how you feel, what is your body saying to you, and realizing maybe I take either a break from this or I move on from it completely. And ultimately, I had to make a decision a few years ago that my business, certain things work amazing in it, but I had to scale back. And sometimes pivoting doesn't mean that you completely quit something, it just takes a back seat. It's not your full focus. If it works and it is happening, awesome. But don't beat yourself up if you need to move on. The next thing that I want to talk about is really prioritizing your non-negotiables. And for all of us, they're going to be a little bit different, but I think we can all safely say that our well-being has to be a priority. And I don't just mean our fitness and our sleep and our food, while those things are incredible and so important. Obviously, we can't function without them. But other things like how much time do you want to spend making art that is really fueling your soul, your heart, and making you feel fulfilled? There was a point in my business during COVID where I was spending a lot of time teaching live online. And while I was so grateful, I learned a lot. I ultimately realized that I need more time in the studio to feel like my best self. And so realizing what are your non-negotiables? Do you need 20 minutes to journal in the morning? Do you need at least an hour a day in the studio? How much do you want to exercise? Do you need to go on a walk with your partner or your pet? So realizing that you get to decide those things and moving all the other parts around your non-negotiables, because guess what happens? We can push through, and I certainly have moments where I have pushed through so intensely, did whatever was most profitable, or I truly followed the opportunities that were coming my way. But ultimately, it started to build up resentment. And when the resentment started to build a little bit too much, I didn't want to do those things at all. And I got burnt out. That is how we prevent burnout. We say yes to more things. We can't always eliminate everything we don't necessarily love, right? But we say yes to more things that bring us either self-care, personal fulfillment, and our inner zone of genius. And we minimize or let go of as many things as we can. I know it's not possible to do everything, but we trust that we are worthy of taking care of ourselves spiritually, emotionally, and of course, showing up and doing the things that pay the bills when we have to. But I realized that if you are constantly grinding, if you are avoiding your health routine, if you're not exercising even a little bit, like going on a walk or you're not nourishing your body with healthy food or taking time to rest, eventually your capacity is going to go down. And I have been there where I could work my ass off, but there came a point where I just couldn't. And my art was starting to suffer, my mental health was declining. And so I made some big changes over the past few months, and I encourage you to do the same if you're feeling like this. Number 3 is living an artful life. So, not just living a life that is like, I check a box, I go into the studio, which is awesome. I'm all for having a strong studio practice. I think that's the foundation for any creative person, whether you're sewing or singing or dancing or writing or sculpting or painting, right? Like me. Living an artful life isn't just about the doing, it's about keeping that part of your brain that's an artist on throughout your day. Looking at the colors. I mentor a 13-year-old girl once a week, and she's amazing. And one thing that I was talking to her about last week was, even though you're not painting with me in my studio, when you're looking at the colors of the flowers or the sky, try to pay attention and then identify how would you mix that. Or even just enjoying and looking at the shapes of things. You don't have to make it a whole to-do list, but living an artful life, enjoying the design on the coffee cup you get at the coffee shop, enjoying like I said, the breeze, the smells. Like, I recently started gardening, and my garden is going to be an extension of my practice because ultimately I plan on painting those things. So living an artful life, not as this anxious to-do list, must paint for an hour a day. That's great if that works for you, but enjoying all of it, because all of it fuels your practice, the traveling you do, the books you read, even the movies or shows you watch. All of that is going to seep into your subconscious and ultimately come out. So feed your heart and your mind with beauty and live like an artist rather than only focusing on doing and how much do I need to do? How much do I need to paint? There's no number. It's how you live. It's who you are. It's how you see the world. And that, my friends, is the biggest gift. The next part that I want to talk about is the reality for me has been learning to accept the fact that I am a black sheep. I'm a black sheep in the artist community because I'm also an entrepreneur. I'm a black sheep in the entrepreneur community because I'm not all numbers in business and I prioritize my studio practice. I'm a black sheep in many circles, and it has been so important for me to really focus on being around people who accept me for who I am without trying to tell me that the way that I'm doing my art or the way that I'm running my business is not correct. And it can get really lonely and it can feel really isolating when someone tells you, for example, well, you'll never be a great artist because you have an online business and you have this magazine, right? And it can be really tough when you are in a coaching call with other business owners and you're just as ambitious as them, but you are not willing to sacrifice your studio time to focus on more revenue generating activities. So it can be really hard when others don't get your vision, but I encourage you to really understand that all of our paths are different. And if anyone tells you that you have to be a certain way to be a success, I encourage you to not listen to that, because when you look at the world and you look at other people, whether it's celebrities or authors or artists you admire, you'll see that there's bajillions of different paths that people can take. It could be like Stephen King and focus solely on writing. He is kind of a unicorn. There's not many like him. There's Ken Follett also is another one. But then there's people like Elizabeth Gilbert and Maggie Smith who are amazing writers or poets, but they also have a Substack and they teach courses and they do keynote speeches, right? Same thing in the art world. It's beautiful if someone is able to dedicate all of their time and is compensated to be in the studio all day. But for most of us, especially if you're a caretaker, a mother, or you haven't yet monetized your craft, and by the way, it's not even required to. There's no reason to put that kind of pressure on yourself if you don't want to. There's people who are professors, they're art teachers, or they have a job that supports them that's not in the arts, and they're perfectly okay with that. Just know that your path is unique, and if you feel judged or you feel like your success isn't possible just because of the way that you are, maybe you have ADHD like me and you're multi-passionate, or people call it multidisciplinary in the arts. You got to embrace that, because there's so many incredible multidisciplinary artists, and whenever you hear someone judging or saying real artists don't do X, Y, and Z, real artists don't have other income streams, they're just really successful selling originals all the time, I dare you to question them, and I dare you to find evidence of someone who's a role model who has a similar path as you. And I promise you, you're going to find at least a handful of people who are doing things in their own way that might be closer to what you want to do. And I'll be honest, for me, like I used to think when I first started my magazine, like, oh, well, when this becomes successful, I'll just sell it off and I'll focus on my art. And I actually had a few opportunities over the past decade to sell my business. And ultimately, I decided against it because I actually love it. And so, even though for someone, their ultimate goal might be to be completely in a studio, many of us enjoy giving back to the community. Many of us enjoy both the benefits of having multiple income streams as well as, having the interest and the fuel that comes from being around other people, passing on our knowledge and experience, and just being surrounded by like-minded community members. So don't ever think that there's one way to be a success. And like I said, if you feel judged or you feel criticized or if someone tells you that you can't be successful because of XYZ, I really discourage you from listening to them because chances are they have a very limited worldview. And if anyone is, here's my opinion, if anyone is truly happy with their life and the way that they're running their business, why would they feel the need to bring someone down and tell them that their way is wrong? There's plenty of room for all kinds of paths and options and varieties. And there is a great book by James Altucher, actually two books. One is Choose Yourself and one is 10,000, I forget what it was, some kind of experiment. And basically in both of these books, James talks about betting on yourself, idea combination. So for example, like combining different ideas to make a new product. And ultimately in this world, in this day and age, we have to be adaptable and we have to be creative because there's not like a career path that is lined up for us when we graduate from art school. And especially after speaking to the college students this month, I realized like we basically have to apply our creativity to our business or career as well. And that can be a beautiful thing, even though I know that can be overwhelming. The next lesson is learning from negative feedback. And a few years ago, I was listening to the Jocko podcast, and Jocko said something about negative comments or the criticism that he received. And ultimately, he said to the troll or the person who wrote something nasty under a comment, he said, "You're right." And he said, "They're right." And even though some comments or some negative feedback can be really uncalled for, it could be hurtful, it could feel unfair or unjust. Ultimately, what we have to remember is when we receive a negative comment or criticism, that person is speaking from their experience and their opinion, and therefore they are right. It doesn't mean that we agree with them. It doesn't mean that they're right in the grand scheme of things, but to them and their limited experience, let them have their opinion, right? And I've had my share of criticism over the years. It was sometimes something really silly, like I had a typo and, really triggered someone, or there was an actual misalignment where I didn't communicate maybe my services, or something was not communicated directly to a client and they felt like, they didn't get enough of whatever. Ultimately, I learned to just agree with them and say, "I'm so sorry you had, negative experience. You are absolutely right. How can I make this better?" Sometimes it could look like a refund. In the cases of social media, usually it's just block and blast because I don't have energy to deal with. It's my platform. The way that I see criticism online is someone is coming to my house to be mean and to be nasty, and they don't really belong there. So I usually just remove them if it's something really harmful or toxic. But if it's a client or someone I delivered a service to, I'm always happy to listen and make things right and ultimately just move on as quickly as I can from that. And the thing about harsh feedback is it hurts the most usually when there is a grain of truth to it. And I had a negative experience a little short while ago where a client was really rude. She was lashing out and yelling at me in front of other students. And if you were on that call, I am so sorry. And it was really unfair and unprofessional because it was in public and she never tried to reach out or to, get help prior to that. So it was put me on the spot. I cried a lot. But ultimately, I think the reason why it bothered me so much was because what she was saying was ultimately true. And it was misconstrued, of course, and it wasn't fair. But I had to just say, you know what? She's right. But I am doing my best. I ended up refunding her and moving on. And what I took from that experience was that it was so painful for me and so scary and a little bit traumatizing, but it actually encouraged and inspired me to be kinder. And I had to process my feelings, and I had to take a few days. I haven't been showing up online just for like a week or two. But ultimately, I faced a big fear of mine being yelled at like that in public. And then I also just sent her love, and I said, well, I want to be the kindest version of myself, because there's no reason to crush someone's spirit if you're just unhappy with something. You can easily ask for help or ask for a refund. And so ultimately, it taught me that we are all worthy of kindness, of love, of support. And the thing is, none of us are perfect, especially when you're starting something new, or, you know, even if you're not. Sometimes I still make mistakes, and I've been doing this for over 15 years. And just giving grace to yourself and each other, and asking for help when you need it instead of letting things bottle up. But ultimately, shielding yourself from criticism is a losing battle, because no matter how amazing you are, no matter how perfect you think you are, someone is going to be unhappy or triggered based on their own personal experience. So move on from that quickly. And as we finish up this episode, I want to share a few more things to help you along your journey. Like I mentioned earlier, the reason why I'm still here is that failure and disappointments are inevitable. The goal, of course, is not to avoid them or to shrink back, because they are going to happen. Not every launch is a guaranteed success. Not every painting we make is going to sell. Not every project we embark on might be the winning one. We had crazy things happening. Like Alicia and we lost our first book deal. I had a solo show almost get canceled. I had haters come out of the woodwork in some of my most epic moments that I was so excited for, that were tarnished by their negativity and hatred. And ultimately, all of these are gifts, and they help us to focus on what's really important. They help us to identify what's worth fighting for versus what we want to move on from, what's not worth the battle. One thing I also want to caution against is, as you maybe look forward to your next decade, is to be very, very self-assured in your beliefs, knowing what you love, and getting clearer and clearer on your mission. One of my biggest failures is to really believe and listen to other people when they were, let's say, selling something to me. And by selling, I don't just mean they were offering me a product, service, course, or anything like that, but these ideas that people had. For example, right now, we might be hearing a lot of rhetoric around AI, and people are trying to sell us on the idea that AI is going to be more efficient and help us with our workload, which has yet to be proven, to be honest with you. But when I was starting, people were really trying to convince me to coach, to do live coaching. And I'm glad that I did. I'm really grateful that I went on this journey. But when I look back and I analyze some of the people that gave me this advice, I realized they were ultimately trying to sell their own products and services, and they really didn't care about me and what's best for my business. So even though there's nothing singularly wrong with anything someone's trying to quote unquote sell to you, you have to know yourself. You have to understand, once again, what are your non-negotiables? What is your ideal week? What do you want to do? What kind of activities? How do you want to work with people? And so when someone is pushing a new idea to you, whether it's in the form of a book, a podcast, an ad, whatever it is, just be honest with yourself and say, is this an alignment for you? And everyone has an agenda, and that's not a bad thing, because they're not always malicious or trying to sway you to their side. They're sharing based on their experience of what worked for them. That lifestyle or that type of business might not work for you. For example, I know that running a magazine is not for everyone. I also know that I'm not someone who wants to spend every waking of the day painting, because I love a variety of things. I love learning, I love reading, I love being on the show here, talking to you. And so ultimately, do the internal work. Know that you know yourself best. And even though everyone has an agenda, sometimes that agenda might not align with yours, and that is okay. You don't have to hate them. You don't have to lash out at them. You can just say, no, thank you. I'm so glad this works for you, and move on. The next part is, of course, goal setting. And goal setting can be tricky. I know that it's like everyone tells you, set your goals, get clear on your vision. And that is very true, and I still stand by that. But one thing I want to say to you is that goal setting it has to be really personal and it can also evolve. I talked about this a few times on the podcast, but my goals right now are very different from what they were when I first started. I remember when I first quit my day job, if I could just make $75,000 a year, I'd be so thrilled. And that's still a great amount of money, especially when you're just starting. And within 2 years, I reached that goal and I was so excited and grateful. But ultimately, I realized like one, I had to dream a lot bigger. And two, some of the goals I set were because I thought that's what success meant. It wasn't actually my definition of success, right? So having shows in New York, London, all that stuff, it happened. It was great, but it was like a very short term and kind of like shallow goal. And so thinking deeper about what you want to achieve in this life, knowing that anything is possible, whether it's financial or career related. And one question my coach, Emily Williams, asked me the other day was, what hill are you willing to die on? And that can be a great question. You know, for you, it might be that painting is healing, right? Or it could be like that artists deserve to get paid or whatever it is. Think about what your why is. What are you willing to fight for? What is the message or the substance that you really want to pass on to other people? So that's what I have for you today. And I want to just share some of these things because most of them, like I said, are failures because I failed. And the whole thing started, the reason why I'm here today started because of failure. I was unsuccessful in getting a day job in the arts, which was my original goal. And that failure led me to starting my first magazine. And the failure to find a day job that supported me, that also allowed me to paint and to work on the magazine, led me to becoming self-employed. And my failures and my figuring things out of how to sell my art online, how to monetize my online business led me to coaching and mentoring and having my membership and our courses at Create You. So every failure so far has had a pretty great return on investment. And so I want to share what I shared with the students at MSU last week is that trust your unique path. Say thank you to the failures. Say thank you because they too are blessings in disguise 90% of the time, especially if it's not something serious like money. We can always make more money back. I've had debt, I've paid it off. I've had debt again, I've paid it off. Like money is not something to be afraid of. And I'm going to be speaking a lot about money in the coming episodes as well. And ultimately, one, it gives you interesting stories, it prepares you for what's ahead. And some of the quote unquote debilitating failures that I experienced early on, they were such blessings because I actually ended up failing much worse later on. So I knew, like, okay, well, I survived that. Like, okay, I'm going to figure this one out too. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I'm so excited to show up for the next decade together. If this resonated or if you have any questions, feel free to drop a comment or you can email me at info@createmagazine.com, and I'd love to keep this conversation going. Don't forget to join our newsletter and check out our opportunities for artists by going to createmagazine.co, or you can check out our on-demand courses, including courses on money coming soon to Create You. You can go to createyou.co. Thank you so much for being part of my art family. I'm so grateful for you. And cheers to the next 10 years.